everyone. Today's question is a really good one and one that I really like to make sure people know this information. And that is, at what point do you decide to give your goat a combination dewormer rather than just a single dewormer? Now, first of all, let me define what combo dewormer means. It does not mean buying one of those horse dewormers at the farm store that says it includes two drugs. Those dewormers, the second drug in those dewormers is praziquantel, and praziquantel only kills tapeworms. And so unless your goat has tapeworms, then you don't need it. The reason they make those for horses is that the two different dewormers kill two different things. It kills the first dewormer, like ivermectin or whatever, kills the roundworms, and then the praziquantel kills tapeworms. And praziquantel only kills tapeworms. So that they have that for horses. And I'll talk another day about why we don't recommend horse dewormers for goats anymore. That's an old practice that we used to do back when I started 20 years ago, but it's not done anymore. So I am not talking about buying a horse dewormer that has two different drugs in it. What I am talking about, so first of all, tapeworms actually don't make goats sick. So I know that sounds crazy. And tapeworms are the only worm that you see in a goat's poop. The goats that make worms sick are roundworms. And the worst roundworm is barber pole worm. All of the roundworms are invisible to the naked eye, so you can't see them in the poop. So seeing worms in the poop or seeing, rice, what looks like rice or noodles in the poop is not a good indicator that your goat needs to be dewormed. That just means the goat has tapeworms, and tapeworms don't feed on the goat. So they're not making your goat sick. Roundworms, however, tend to cause really big problems with like weight loss and diarrhea. And barber pole worm specifically causes anemia, and anemia can kill goats faster than anything because obviously we all need to have lots of red blood cells. Without that, we're goners. So that's why doing the FAMACHA check is really important. Like you can't just say, oh, I'm going to do a fecal every 6 months or even every 3 months, because a month later you could have an extremely anemic goat that could die on you. So checking the eyelids on your goats and checking body condition, doing the whole 5-point check is really important. So what is a combination dewormer and how does that work? A combination dewormer means that you give dewormers from 2 or 3 classes of the dewormers at the same time, not together. You don't mix them together. And heaven help us, there's a YouTube video where somebody's mixing them all together. Do not do this. They are not chemically compatible. So when they've got dewormers like this, like in other countries, we do not in the United States. And when you mix them together, you need to make sure that they're chemically compatible so that they still work. So please don't do that, even if you see it on another YouTube video, okay? You give them sequentially. So you give one, then you give the next one, then you give the next one. Now, it may look like we have a lot of dewormers in this country, but we really don't. All the dewormers fall into 3 classes. So you've got one class that includes all the clear dewormers. And that's not a scientific term. I'm not going to give you all the scientific terms, but all of the dewormers that are clear fall into one class. All the dewormers that are white fall into another class. And then all of the other dewormers fall into another class. They used to be called the yellow dewormers years ago, but they're not anymore. In fact, I call them the solid dewormers because they're either in the form of a bolus or a powder that you have to mix with liquid before you use it. So, so those are the 3 classes. Now, the clear dewormers include ivermectin and moxidectin. Ivermectin and moxidectin are the generic names. Ivermectin, one of the brand names for that is Ivomec. Moxidectin, the most popular moxidectin brand is Cydectin. So you would use one dewormer from that class. So you would either use something that is labeled as ivermectin, Ivomec, moxidectin, Cydectin, one of those. The white dewormers are Safeguard and Valbazin. Safeguard is fenbendazole, Albazin is albendazole. So those are the 2 white dewormers. And so you would use one of those. Valbazen should not be used during pregnancy. So if your goat's pregnant, that makes the decision for you right there. It would be Safeguard. Now, in the third class of dewormers, we have the pelleted dewormers, which are Morantel tartrate. I am not a huge fan of those. I would never use that as an individual dewormer because some goats just won't eat them. You can't squirt them down a goat's throat like you can a liquid. You put them in front of the goat either chooses to eat them or not, and the goat may choose not to eat them, especially if it's a kid, because kids tend to get freaked out when you separate them from their herd mates. So that is really not a great one. The other drug in that class is levamisole, and the brands of that are Levamed, Levasol, and that is truly the dewormer of last resort. That one is stronger than any other dewormer on the market. Hopefully you will never, ever have to use it. So typically, if you're going to do a combination deworming, you could do it from the clear class and the white class. And not worry about that third class unless you've got serious issues of dewormer resistance. So why do you give a combination dewormer? Basically, you need to give it if a dewormer is no longer working. So let's say, for example, you give your goat a dose of ivermectin and nothing is getting better. You've checked the eyelids, they're not getting darker. The body condition is not improving. The goat is still pooping logs or still has diarrhea. Nothing is improving, and it's been a week or two. So there's a couple different things that could be going on there. I have a whole nother video on why the dewormer didn't work, and dewormer resistance is just one of them. You may have used the wrong dosage. So for all of those dewormers, you double the dosage that you would use for sheep. That is the most common reason I see. I have so many people come to me that have a goat that is not getting better. And the two things, one is they've usually given them the sheep dosage, which is half as much as what a goat needs. And unfortunately, a lot of times their vet is the one who told them to do this. So you need to make sure you use twice the dosage if you're doing ivermectin, Cydectin, Safeguard, or Valbazen. And then the other possibility is if you gave the correct dosage and your goat is not getting better, then you could have dewormer resistance. And unfortunately, if you gave the sheep dosage, every worm that survived that deworming is now resistant to that dewormer, because it was like you vaccinated them against that dewormer. So if you've underdosed, then you definitely need to do a combination deworming. So that means, like, say, for example, you gave them ivermectin at the sheep dosage. They didn't get better. So now go ahead and use the ivermectin again, because you've already got it on your shelf. Use it at twice the sheep dosage now, and use one of the white dewormers. If your goat is pregnant, you want to use Safeguard, and you want to do it at twice the label dosage. Even if you've got the one for goats, I've explained this before why. Even if you've got the one for goats, you need to give them twice that label dosage, because that's what the current research says you need to do. The label is unfortunately wrong. So, and the reason it's super cool, because they work synergistically, because you're like, but you just said that the worms are all resistant to ivermectin. So ivermectin will still kill the larva from all the worms that your goat just picked up off the pasture that had not been exposed to the ivermectin. So it's still going to kill some of them, and then the Safeguard's going to kill others. So in my parasite course, I have this fabulous chart from the American Consortium of Small Ruminant Parasite Control, and somebody went through and did a bunch of math. It was really cool. Ideally, your dewormer is going to kill as close to 100% as possible. Really 99% is like the best that we can usually hope for. So that's the goal. And so they have this chart that shows, like if ivermectin is only killing 50% of the worms in your goat and Safeguard only kills 90%, when they are used together, they're going to kill this percentage over here, which is going to be much higher, like 95% or something, than if you had just used one of them, because the Safeguard's going to kill some of the worms the ivermectin didn't kill, and the ivermectin's going to kill some of the worms that the Safeguard didn't kill. Also, I kind of think there's probably a 1-2 punch thing there. Like one of the dewormers might make it feel kind of sick, and then the other one, it's easier for the other one to kill it. So you use combination dewormers in cases of dewormer resistance. And if you have a really severe problem with dewormer resistance, you can use the third class. You could also use the if you want to buy the Morantel tartrate in those pellets and use it, you can. I used to do this. I really don't anymore because I just don't know that it really was helping a whole lot. But if you've got the Morantel tartrate pellets, go for it. Go ahead and feed that to the goat. If you're doing it with the other 2 dewormers and they don't eat a lot of the Morantel tartrate, it's not the end of the world. I would never give a goat just the Morantel tartrate pellets. That's like positive pellets, something like that. I would never just give them the pellets on their own, because if they eat half of it, then you created a bunch of worms that are resistant to Morantel tartrate. So that's why I would only use Morantel tartrate as the third dewormer in a three different class dewormer for your goat. And you would give the white dewormer, and then in a new syringe, you would give the clear dewormer. And then if you're doing the Morantel tartrate, they would eat that in a pan. If you're doing levamisole, which, like I said, you really only want to use that if you absolutely have to, then you would do that in a separate syringe also. So I hope that this has been helpful in terms of helping you to understand when you need to use a combination dewormer. I know that the consortium has information out that suggests always using combination dewormers. My fear of telling people to do that is that I still see way too many people overusing dewormers and thinking that their goat needs a dewormer when they don't. And so I'm afraid that, because if you do all 3 classes, then you've essentially now you've got one dewormer. And if your goats the worms in your goats become resistant to that, then you are in trouble because you got nothing else. And as someone who lived through complete dewormer resistance 15 years ago with my goats and just sat there and could do nothing but watch goats die because none of the dewormers worked anymore, this is not something that anybody wants to go through. So, you have to be very careful and know that you are only doing it with a goat that fails the 5-point check. It really doesn't matter what the fecal count is. If your goat is walking around with 1,000 eggs per gram and it is fat and healthy, then it doesn't need a dewormer. And research has shown that doing that, giving dewormers to goats that are not clinically ill, simply leads to dewormer resistance faster. So you don't want to use the dewormers any more than you have to. So like I said, we dealt with complete dewormer resistance 15 years ago. Eventually the dewormers started working again. And now I don't do combination dewormers. Basically I buy a bottle of Safeguard, I use it until it's gone, and then I'll buy a bottle of ivermectin, use it till it's gone or expires. Actually, that's what happens. They expire because I generally have only 1 or 2 goats every year that needs a dewormer. And usually it is, if we have any yearlings that freshen, it's usually a yearling after she freshens. So I could talk about this all day long. The parasite course has about 7 hours of video in it. So there's so much to know about this. It is not as simple as take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. There is so many times people ask me questions about parasites and my answer is, well, it depends. And then I start asking a lot of questions about your goats and your pasture management and that kind of stuff. So if you got any questions, post in the comment section below. And we'll also post a link to our article on goat worms on the Thrifty Homesteader website, because that is like a big roundup of all the research. And it has links out to specific articles and podcast episodes that I have done with parasite researchers. They get more in depth with this. because I know some people are going to be like, well, why are you saying this when somebody on this Facebook group says something the opposite? And it's because a lot of old information from the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s just keeps getting recycled and repeated, even though current research has shown that those are losing strategies. So take care. I hope this has been helpful. Talk to you guys again soon.